All right, Shalom. This is a Wednesday men's study. We're doing Galatians and Galatians chapter 4. And we're going to look at groups of 10 of Galatians chapter 4. So we have the interaction between Paul and the Galatians. And he was basically reflecting on how their understanding of Scripture kind of was twisted. From believing that Messiah was their free gift unto salvation, now thinking that they must do certain things in order to receive salvation, such as circumcision and sacrifices. Paul made reference saying, that Messiah was brought before them clearly, and how do they think they can start in the ruach or in the spirit and finish off in the flesh or with their own works. And so he's emphasizing on understanding of faith and how faith includes the understanding of what you're doing and your lifestyle, who you're with, who you worship. It's an understanding, and when that understanding changes, the faith changes. That's how you depart from the faith. You depart from the faith when your understanding is changed. So we're at Galatians chapter 4 now. Now he went from speaking about the curse in chapter 3 and the transgression of the law and the purpose of the promise and the law, specifically the sacrificial law. And now he's going into the covenant understanding the covenants. Now I hope that Galatians chapter 4 is gonna kind of broaden our idea of the covenant. When we read it. So we're gonna read in groups of 10. Can somebody read the first 10 verses?
I'm driving, brother. I just got off work. Somebody else wants to. I get home.
No
I have it.
problem, bro. Okay, go ahead, brother.
And I say, for as long as the heir is a child, he is no different from a slave, though he is master of all, but is under guardians and trustees till the time prearranged by the Father. So we also, when we were children, were under the elementary matters of the world, being enslaved. But when the completion of time came, Elohim sent forth his son, born of a woman, born under Torah, to redeem those who were under Torah in order to receive the adoption as sons. And because you are sons, Elohim has sent forth the spirit of his son into your hearts, crying, Abba, Father. So you are no longer a slave, but a son. And if a son, also an heir of Elohim through Messiah. But then, indeed, not knowing Elohim, you serve those which by nature are not mighty ones. But now, after you have known Elohim, or rather are known by Elohim, how do you turn again to the weak and poor elementary matters, to which you wish to be enslaved again? You closely observe days and months and seasons and years.
All right, you want to mention this?
Well, and keeping what we've been reading before, this verse 9, how, again, what you were just saying in the beginning, how they have turned back to more elementary matters, matters of flesh, instead of, trusting in the belief that they have in the Messiah, think that those things are going to do it, as it's saying in the beginning, that was kind of like a stepping stone to lead us to Messiah. Now we want to go back under, what was leading us to where we needed to be. That's kind of what I'm seeing there in those verses, really. That's really all I have to say.
No, absolutely. That's kind of the main thing. It's a correlation between how the Yahudim live pertaining to the works of the law and how the nations live pertaining to the false mighty ones. It was the same way. The Yahudim thought they were coming close to Yah by offering sacrifice, by demonstrating these rich things. They thought that that's how they got close to Yah. And so did the pagans. The pagans, when they did certain things, that's how they thought they got close, or that's how they thought they were heard by their false mighty ones. Just looking at this, right? So it starts to give you the difference between a child of disobedience and a child of Yah. So it starts as it says, now I say that the heir or the son, as long as he is a child, differs nothing from a servant. So as long as he is a child, differs nothing from a servant, though he is master of everything. So he's talking about a real child not being different from a servant because of the way that the child is, the mentality. Verse 2 says, but if under tutors and governors until the time appointed by the Father, even so we, when we were children, were in bondage under the element of the world. So this is referring to, I know times there's this idea that this is referring to the Yahudim being under the law, or under the keeping, or the under the law, basically. The fact that they walk, try to keep the law. That's what many people look at this, but this is not referring to Yah's word. This is referring to the nations and how the nations are in bondage to the elements or rudiments of the world. The nature of the world is death, which is sin. The world was naturally sinful. The world was naturally wicked. The world was contrary to Yah's commandments. So he's showing that the children disobedient, the children that was in bondage, because they were connected with what did in the world. Verse 4 says, when the fullness of the time has come, Elohim sent forth his son, made of a woman, and then it says made under the law. What does it mean to be made under the law? Let me ask that question.
Subject to it?
There's a verse in Romans chapter 3. It's phrased the same way in Romans chapter 3, verse 19 in the King James. I'm not sure it is in other Bibles, but let me know if it gives you the same sentiment. It says in verse 9 of Romans chapter 3. Now we know that whatsoever the law says, it says to them who are under the law, that every mouth may be stopped and all the world may become guilty for Elohim. So
What verse are you?
according to,
I'm sorry.
this is verse 19. Can you read 19 of Romans 3?
3. Okay, I'm sorry. I was in the wrong chapter. That's why. Okay.
But can you read it? I think you have a different version.
Yeah. Let me get to it here. I was in chapter 8. Okay. And we know that whatever the Torah says, it says to those who are in the Torah, so that every mouth might be stopped and all the world come under judgment before Elohim.
Okay, so that's not really it either. So in the Torah, it's emphasizing on the fact of forgiveness, so every mouth may be stopped in the world, the whole world, may become guilty. So it's like the world is not in Torah. In Torah, I think, is the wrong phrasing. Because the world is not in Torah. And if the Torah reveals your sinfulness, that means they're not following Torah. So it's not those who are in Torah. Under the law is what my version says. And under the law is a reference of condemnation. If you are under the law, it means that the law is above you, dictating you what you are supposed to do, or what you have not done already, declaring your guiltiness. That's why it said in verse 19, it says, whatsoever the law says, it says to them who are under the law, that every mouth may be stopped and the world may become guilty. You see that? So the phrase in the law or under the law is an emphasis on guiltiness by the law reflecting or revealing guiltiness. When you come in a covenant, Yah puts his law inside of you. It's no longer above you. It's inside of you. It's a part of you. So there's a difference between being being under the law and having the law put inside of you at that point. When you have the law put inside of you, it becomes a foundation. You're on the law. The law is not on top of you dictating your guilt. So going back to Galatians 4, verse 4, it says, but when the fullness time was come, Elohim, his son, made of a woman, made under the law. Now watch verse 5, to redeem them that were under the law, that we might receive the adoption of sons. So does yours say in the law in verse 5 well, Nathaniel?
Verse 5, to redeem those who were under Torah in order to receive the adoption as son. It's the same.
All right, so it says under, okay. So it says that he was made under the law to redeem them that were under the law.
Yeah. Oh,
So if Romans 3 verse 19 and 20 says, oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So if under the law means to be guilty or condemned by the law, right? Meaning that you have sins on you. It says that in verse 4 that there was a fullness of time in which Elohim sent his son, made of a woman, and it says made under the law. Will, are you still?
You cut out again a little bit. After you read verse 4, it cut out. We didn't hear the question.
Oh, okay. I was letting Will go ahead because he had his hand up.
Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't hear you. Yeah, I'm glad that's being clarified because that's when people bring up the point of we're not under the law. You first have to be walking in His righteousness. This is my understanding. When you're under the law, you're under the condemnation. You're living in sin, and you're actually transgressing the law. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, absolutely. That's what Romans 3 verse 19 says.
Right. So that's beautiful right there. Clarification on that. That's the way I try to explain it to people, gently as possible, that, when we're not under the law, that means that we are walking in righteousness with mercy and trying to live in obedience. Then you're not under the law. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
That's a very and
You
understanding.
heard me, Will? That's correct.
And I think that's what you're trying to explain and break down there. I'm just saying you're
Right.
being
Right.
pretty much saying, but from my angle,
No, absolutely. That's why when we're looking at verse in verse 5 where it says that Messiah was made under law, and then verse 6 says to redeem them that were under the law, to get us out from being under the law. And then people think that means that he sinned. It doesn't mean that he sinned. It means that he was made as a sinner. He was put the sins of the world on. And there's a verse, 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 21. Second Corinthians chapter 5, verse 21.
So which chapter?
It
I'm sorry.
says,
Maybe it's my phone.
I'm sorry, this is 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 21. So it's okay. To show how Messiah was made under the law. Can you guys hear me?
yeah, I'm hearing you just fine, bro.
Okay. And so it says, for he have made him to be sin for us, who knew no sin, that we might be made the righteousness of Elohim in him. So it's showing us that Yah has made the Messiah to be sin for us. So we can be made to be made the righteousness of Elohim in the Messiah. That's why it says in Galatians that he was made under law to redeem those who were under the law. Not that he sinned, but that he took the sins. That way he can deliver us from sin.
Yeah. It reminds me of that
Is that clear?
other, yeah, that's very clear. It also reminds me of, you can probably bring up the chapter there, I'm sure, when it says, for thee are not under the law, but you are under the grace. Don't remember exactly what that says.
Right. No, that's absolutely right. That's in Romans chapter 6, where it says we are no longer under law, but under grace. So we are no longer in the condemnation of the breaking of the law. We are now under Yah's authority, reception of power and strength to keep the law, to walk in the law, or to avoid transgression instead of to continuing transgression.
Right.
So that's in Galatians, Romans chapter 6.
Right. So can we connect chapter 8, I think it is, where it says, when it brings up a verse about the law of sin and death that we really not under anymore.
Right. Romans chapter 7, the last verse says there's a law in our members bringing us into the captivity of the law of sin and death, right? And then we were delivered from the law of sin and death by the death of Messiah, the death and resurrection of Messiah. That's how we were delivered from the sin that's in us. That's how we were delivered from the guilt of breaking the Torah. So
Yeah. So that's an understanding that must be understood.
right. Yeah. And then it incorporates as we move forward, verse the adoption of sons. The adoption of sons. To redeem us that were under the law, verse 5, that we might receive the adoption of sons. And it says, and because you are children, Elohim sent forth the spirit of his son into your hearts, crying, Abba, Father. This is the receiving of the Ruach. So when we receive the Ruach, it is the receiving of his son into our hearts. And when we receive the Ruach, his son, into our heart, we become children. We become Yah's children instead of children of disobedience. And that's why it says in verse 7, it says, wherefore you are no more a servant, but a son. And if a son, then you're an heir of Elohim through Messiah. Howbeit then, when you knew not Elohim, here we go, verse 8 and 9. When you did not know Elohim, you worshipped or you served by nature those who were not mighty ones, or you served false mighty ones. You did not know Yah. But now, after you are known or have known Elohim, but rather are known by Elohim, meaning he's in you, how do you turn again to the weak and beggarly elements whereunto you desire again to be in bondage? So he correlated their experience before they knew Yah and they served their mighty ones to now knowing Yah, moving away from faith, going into trying to receive salvation by their actions. So it's interesting how in people's lives there's still a difference between somebody trying to keep Yah commandments different from following a pagan god. But Paul is saying that just like trying to receive salvation without Messiah by your own works is exactly the same as when you were without Yah, you did service toward other mighty ones trying to receive salvation, trying to receive acceptance from the false mighty ones. You know, so we can't look at one false worship as better than another false worship. Paul here is combining both, saying that the way that you serve when you didn't have Yah is the way that you serve trying to obtain salvation with your own works. So it's a pretty serious thing in Paul's mind. We're in Galatians chapter 4. We're in Galatians chapter 4. Just looked at verse 8, 9, and 10, where it correlated the service that they did before they knew Yah to what they're doing at that moment, knowing Yah, trying to obtain salvation by doing, by performing acts or works of the law, such as sacrifices and circumcisions like that. Can somebody read? Let's look at the next 10 verses, verse 11 to 20. 11 to 20. Can somebody read verse 11 to 20? Anybody?
If nobody else will, I'll go ahead and read it too.
All right, go ahead, brother.
Knowing therefore the fear of Yahuah, we persuade men. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm still in Corinthians. Give me 1 second.
No, that's all right. Galatians 4, verse 11 to 20.
Galatians 4. All right, there we go. I'm sorry. It's moving slow. My computer's moving slow. All right. I fear for you, lest by any means I have labored for you in vain. Brothers, I beg you to become as I am, because I am as you are. You did not wrong me at all. But you know that through weakness of the flesh, I brought the good news to you before. And my trial, which was in my flesh, you did not despise or reject, but you received me as a messenger of Elohim and Messiah Yahusha. What then was your blessedness? For I bear you witness that if possible, you would have plucked out your own eyes and given them to me. So then, have I become your enemy, speaking truth to you? They are ardent toward you for no good, but they wish to shut you out, that you might be ardent toward them. And it is good always to be ardent in what is good, and not only when I am present with you. My little children, for whom I am again in birth pains until Messiah is formed in you. Even now, I wish to be present with you now and to change my voice, for I have doubts about you.
All right, so now it's about to get into the crux of the matter, relationship between Yah and the believers. Now remember, these people, he's writing a letter to believers. He's not writing a letter to non-believers. But what they're doing is that they are now trying to pursue the men that came there after Paul left. They're trying to gain their approval instead of following Yah's word. Let's start from verse 11. Do you want to say something?
No, go ahead.
All right. So it says, let's looking at verse let's see their reaction in verse 15 says, where is then the blessings you spoke of? So talking about something that they experienced together, something that he heard from the Galatians. He says, for I bear record, like I remember that if it had been possible, the way that you treated me, the way that if you would have plucked your eyes from me. You know, and now Paul is being looked at like he's like against him because he's coming. I'm telling them that whatever is being told to them is incorrect. So he's dealing with battling between not the Galatians per se, but the people's doctrines that came in and taught them to try to circumcise their children, try to sacrifice offerings in order to get their sin forgiven. This is what's being told to them, and we see that in the book of Acts, but we're looking at it right here. But Acts chapter 15 is that there were these guys they were believers, they were Pharisees and Sadducees, so they were believers that kept them kind of perpetuating a lot of the traditions that they taught. And so Paul is writing them a letter. These are people who actually dealt with those false doctrines of those Pharisees, Sadducee believers. So he's trying to get them out of the mindset of trying to perform actions to receive deliverance. Let's look at this. Obviously, in verse 16, it says, I become your enemy because I tell you the truth. Like the way they were treating Paul at that time was kind of like his information or what he was taught teaching not as good as what was being taught him at this point. And that the people in verse 18, it says, it is good to be zealously afflicted always in the good thing, but not only when I am present with you. In verse 17 is they zealously afflict you, but not well. They would exclude you, that you might affect them, meaning like that you may follow them, you may uplift them or lift them up. Let's see. There's a few verses earlier in Galatians where he starts talking about these individuals. I'm not sure about another gospel that was taught in chapter 1. In chapter 1, verse 7, it says, which is not another, not verse 7, verse 8. It says, but though we or an angel from heaven preach any other gospel unto you than that which we have preached unto you, let him be cursed. And then in verse 10 it says, for do I now persuade men or Elohim, or do I seek to please men? And if I please men, I am not a servant of Messiah. You know, so he's reflecting on what's happened there. The people that's teaching is also receiving basically praise from the people. The people are exalting the individuals teaching this message. And Paul is trying to bring them back in understanding. All right. So, all right. So look at this now. We're going to start from verse 20. I'm going to read the rest of verse 20 to 30, 21 to 30, 31. It says, tell me, you that desire to be under the law, do you not hear and understand the law? For it is written that Abram had two sons, one by a bondmaid and the other by a free woman. But he who was of the bondman was born after the flesh, but he that of the free woman was by promise. Which things are allegory? For these are two covenants, the one from Mount Sinai, which answers to bondage, which is Hagar. For this Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia, and is also referred to as Jerusalem, which is now, and is in bondage with her children. But Jerusalem, which is above, is free, which is the mother of us all. For it is written, rejoice, you barren that bear not, break forth and cry, you that travail not, for the desolate has more children than she that has a husband. Now we, brethren, just as Isaac was, are the children of the promise. But as then we that was born after the flesh persecuted him that was born after the spirit, even so now it is. Nevertheless, what does scripture say? It says, what does the scripture say? Cast out the bondman and her son, for the son of the bondman shall not be heir with the son of the free woman. So then, brethren, we are not children of the bondwoman, but of the free woman. Okay. So it's going through a whole rendition of the story of Sarah, Hagar, Abraham. Then it refers to the two women, Sarah and Hagar. It doesn't mention Sarah, but it's of course talking about that situation, Genesis chapter 16. And it mentions the two sons. It mentions Isaac and Ishmael, the two sons of Abraham. And it says one is of the bondwoman, one is of the bondwoman and is in bondage, and the other one is by promise and is of the free woman. And it says that we are of the free woman, we're of promise. We are not under of the bondwoman. Now remember, these are the two covenants. These are the two covenants. Yah is telling us to be part of the correct covenant. The next, so we understand that Yah has never made a covenant with Hagar? Do we understand? Let me make sure everybody's on the same page. Has Yah ever made a covenant with Hagar? Anybody? You guys hear me?
Hearing you.
Hey,
Did
brother.
he? Hey,
So,
hey, brother Jadiel. I
yeah,
know Shalom. I know he had that. I'm not sure if it was a covenant, but he promised that he would protect Hagar. I'm not sure if I'm mistaken or not, but I don't think there was ever a covenant with Hagar. There were promises, but I don't know if there was ever
right,
a
right.
covenant.
Now, the incident is in this is he makes a promise to Hagar, not a promise to Hagar, sorry. He makes a declaration to Hagar,
There you go.
telling her that he's going to protect that. Let me go. I believe it is chapter
You're choppy. I'm not hearing you. Not too sure what's going on.
Oh, sorry. This is Genesis chapter 22. Is it Genesis? No, Genesis. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
Let's go to. Man, I'm trying to look for it.
I think your audio is out, brother Jadiel.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Oh, it's choppy. It's
Can you
it's
hear me
kind of
now?
choppy. Say again.
Oh, sorry about that. Um, can you hear? Is it good?
You're intermittent, in and out. You're cutting in and out.
Okay. All right. Give me. All right, guys. All right. So can you guys hear me?
Yep,
We're in.
very clear. You're good now.
Okay. We're taking a look at good. Thank you. We're taking a look at Genesis chapter 21. Genesis chapter 21. When you get that chapter, it tells you that he spoke to Hagar. In verse 17, Genesis chapter 20, he says, and Elohim heard the voice of the lad, and the angel of Elohim, or the messenger of Elohim, called to Hagar out of the Shamayim of heaven, and said to her, what aileth thee, Hagar? Fear not, for Elohim hath heard the voice of the lad where he is. Arise, lift up the lad, and hold him in your hand, for I will make him a great nation. And Elohim opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water, and she went and filled the bottle with the water and gave the lad drink. And Elohim was with the lad, and he grew and dwelt in the wilderness and became an archer. So we see that when he spoke to Hagar, he made not necessarily a promise to her, but a declaration that he's going to be with the lad. And in Genesis 17, it shows us why he's going to be with the lad, not because he's making a covenant with the lad, but because he made a covenant with Abraham about Ishmael. In Genesis 17, Abraham says, where is he? Genesis 17, verse 20. Genesis 17, verse 20, it says, and as for Ishmael, I have heard thee, meaning that Yah had heard Abraham's prayer. Behold, I have blessed him, and I will make him fruitful and will multiply him exceedingly. 12 rulers shall he beget, and I will make him a great nation. And then this is verse 21, but my covenant will I establish with Isaac, which Sarah shall bear to you at this set time in the next year. So when we're looking at Galatians chapter 4, it's mentioning the difference between these two covenants, right? But one covenant is not because of a promise. One covenant is because of the lack of faith. Why did Abraham go into Hagar in the first place? In Genesis chapter 16, it tells us that they lost faith. They lost sight of actual promise. The promise was that the child was supposed to come from Abraham's loins. So we see that in Genesis chapter 16, Sarah makes mention saying that Yah is stopping her from having the child. Yah is not going to promise anything and then stop you from fulfilling that promise. What he's going to do is give time and then fulfill it in his own time. But instead of their trust in Yah, they try to do is obtain the promised son in their own way. This is why in Galatians chapter 4, Hagar is correlated. If you look at it, let's look at it. Galatians chapter 4. Hagar is correlated with Mount Sinai. Not only was she correlated with Mount Sinai in verse 24 of Galatians 4, it says that she was also correlated with Jerusalem that rejecting Messiah, that was persecuting the believers of Messiah in verse 25. Verse 24 and 25 Galatians 4 says, which things are an allegory, for these are the two covenants, the one from Mount Sinai, which enters to bondage, which is Hagar. For this Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia and answers to Jerusalem, which now is and is in bondage with her children. So how does Hagar reflect bondage? How does Hagar reflect Mount Sinai and Jerusalem, which is in bondage? Well, if you look at Mount Sinai, he's not referring to the whole situation of Mount Sinai, such as the giving of the Torah. He's not referring to the giving of the Torah as bondage. He's referring of the breaking of the Torah as bondage. The breaking of the Torah in Mount Sinai, he's referring as Hagar. And Jerusalem, the Yahudim that reject and killed the Messiah, what he's referring to as Jerusalem, which now is and is bondage with her children. So when you're looking at the covenants, it's not saying that this person is in an act covenant with Yah, but that this person is in a broken covenant. Or the reflection of this covenant is that it is broken. Hagar is a reflection of Abraham breaking covenant, or Sarah breaking covenant in unbelief. Mount Sinai, the golden calf, is a reflection of breaking the covenant, which symbolized in Moshe breaking the 10 Commandments when he came down the mountain. And Jerusalem is that was symbol of breaking covenant, which was the Yahudim that said, we don't want no other king but Caesar, and they killed Messiah. So he's saying that this mentality is what brings you into a broken covenant with God. It is not actual covenant that Yah makes with Hagar or disobedient people. It is the covenant that you possess after you was engaged with Yah and you have moved away from Yah. But here's the problem. Just as those representations of moving away from Yah is a reflection of people moving away from Yah, he also goes into the persecution. When you look at Genesis, it also talks about how Ishmael mocked Isaac. And it refers here in Galatians chapter 4, verse 29, is, but as then, he that was born after the flesh persecuted him that was born after the spirit, even so it is now. And then it says, nevertheless, what does the scripture say? Cast out the bondwoman and her son, for the son of the bondwoman shall not be heirs with the son of the free woman. And then it says it correlates all of us, children of the free woman. So we have to understand that we, because of faith, enter into that covenant of Yah, and we are children of the free woman. Those who desire try to obtain the promise by doing works in their minds is fixed on trying to obtain salvation in actual actions, like you keep the Shabbat, so you feel like you are going to to receive a reward because he kept the Shabbat. That mentality is a self-motivated or a self-righteous or actions-based salvation. I am doing this, therefore I receive this. So this is what they did with Hagar. I'm going in unto Hagar, therefore I'm going to receive the promised son. Or Sinai. I'm going to build a golden calf because Moshe was taking too long. And we're going to have a feast to Yah by dancing around the golden calf. This is what it says in Exodus. They refer to the golden calf as Yah. So what they're doing, they're twisting the commandments of Yah and the covenant of Yah and trying to obtain the promises that are made with them in their own way instead of doing it the way Yah says to do it. This is what he said to the Galatians the whole time in the first 4 chapters. He's saying, how did you start out in the Ruach? How did you start out in Ruach and trying to fish in the flesh? How did you start out in the Ruach and trying to finish in the flesh? Let me see. This is Galatians chapter 3, verses 3. It says, are you foolish? Having begun in the Ruach, are you now made perfect or made complete by the flesh? So he's showing that the Galatians, beginning their faith in the belief of Messiah, and then walking in his instruction, but now they have a belief that they need to do instructions in order to receive salvation from Yah. And he correlated that Hagar in Galatians 4, saying that this is the same thing that Abraham and Sarah did. This is the same thing that the Israelites did at Mount Sinai. And this is the same thing that the Yahudim did when Messiah came to the earth. So it's given us clear examples of what it means to walk according to the covenant instead of trying to finish and obtain whatever the covenant says by doing what we think we should be doing. You know, it's very important to grasp that understanding and the way to walk it, because there's a lot of individuals that don't feel secure with Yah because they've done certain things, and that's a problem as far as being in a covenant relationship with Yah. So is there any other questions or any other statements you guys want to bring out? Any questions? Were you guys able to hear me clear, or was I breaking up?
You are still breaking up a little bit. But I guess the whole thing goes back to it's Galatians so far from what I've seen. I haven't been on all the studies, but it's definitely about that walk in Ruach, not about the giving up the laws they say, but it's just that walk in Ruach instead of in flesh, and that's the main point that you're bringing out that I saw today, that you're bringing out today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry about my connection. But when we reflect on Galatians 4, it brings out the 2 covenants to say exactly what you said, bro. That the walk in the Ruach is different from the walk in flesh. Even if you're responding to Torah, there's a different walk when you walk in the Ruach with Torah and when you walk not in the Ruach with Torah.
Yeah.
One looks like Hagar, one looks like Sarah. You know, so yeah, praise Yah. He's emphasizing in Scripture that as we go back and read Torah, we'll understand the way that Moshe wanted us to understand it. He wanted us to understand righteousness in the Torah that Yahuwah wants put inside of us in the birth of the Son. You know, and we need to make that clear, to make that a established point in our homes, before our children walks in their strength rather than in the Ruach. We want to teach individuals how to surrender to the Ruach in their lifestyle, to allow Torah to be manifested. But that's kind of the conclusion of Galatians chapter 4. And we'll continue in Galatians chapter 5 this week, brother. Shalom.
Shalom.
Shalom, Akuti, and Brohim. Thank you so much for viewing this video. We hope it was helpful to your walk in the truth. Remember to always search the scriptures on your own, to study Abba's word and show yourself approved, according to 2 Timothy 2:15. We invite you to study with us. To join us in a live study, just go to our website at assemblyofyahuah.com and click the Join Us tab. We have something available Wednesday through Saturday of every week. If you've been Baruch or blessed by this video today or any other study, we encourage you to go to the Giving tab on our website. Our elders all have their own ways of income, so none of the giving or proceeds go to them. Instead, it goes to biblical assembly needs. We also encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you don't miss any new videos. We sincerely pray that Abba continues to direct your path as you acknowledge Him in all your ways. Much avaha, and again, shalom.